Hi, welcome to the channel. So today I'm reacting to a channel called JW. This is Germany's first land loss in World War II, Tobruk and the Australian forces in Africa. So this video is all about the rats of Tobruk and how they were actually able to defeat Germany on land for the first time. And it wasn't just any German commander that they actually beat, it was General Rommel, the Desert Fox. Let's get to it.
The Right Honourable R.G. Menzies. Fellow Australians, it is my melancholy duty to inform you officially that in consequence of a persistence by Germany in her invasion of Poland, Great Britain has declared war upon her, and that as a result, Australia is also at war.
If you get any value from this video, please go ahead and smash the like button. And more importantly, please go to the original channel and give them a like. And I will link them down below. Thank you.
One of the main achievements of Tobruk was defying Rommel and the German army occupying the Suez Canal and Palestine and Israel. We're proud of that. 8 months is a long time in the war.
First and foremost, you can only survive and prosper in a siege like that with a very strong mental mindset. You can either sit back and let the enemy come to you, or you can take the fight to the enemy. Taking the fight to the enemy won the day in the siege of Tobruk.
Under the leadership of General Leslie Moreshead, he was the brain of the operation. His genius tactic is what beat Rommel. An offensive defense. That was the key to this battle.
The 1930s of Australia was far from prosperous. The Great Depression of America had hit Australia hard, and by 1939, Australia was gradually starting to regain their strength.
Did the Great Depression hit Australia as hard as it did the United States? Because I certainly had no idea that Australia was affected by America's Great Depression. From what I remember, the Great Depression ended in the U.S. because of many of the government programs that FDR actually did institute, as well as the war beginning. That was the key.
10,000 miles away in Europe, tensions were rising. Adolf Hitler's annexation of Austria and Czechoslovakia showed that peace on the continent was slowly beginning to break down. After the signing of the Treaty of Versailles at the end of the First World War, Germany lost everything and was in the midst of an economic collapse. The people were on the verge of rebellion and were still bitter about their loss of the war just 20 years before. Germany had lost everything, and Hitler had promised to take it back. On the 1st of September 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. Britain and France declared war. Australia, meanwhile, was suffering from the tyranny of distance. Commonwealth Dominion of Great Britain on the other side of the world. Robert Menzies, the Prime Minister of Australia, made his intentions clear of remaining by Britain no matter what the circumstance. And that's exactly what he did. Menzies received a formal request from the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and His Majesty King George VI to assist Great Britain in the Second World War. 1 hour and 35 minutes later, Australia declared war on Germany.
So being American, I have a limited knowledge on Australian and Great Britain's politics, especially during this war. So my question is, being a part of the Crown, was Australia obligated to declare war? or are they doing it just to maintain the close relations and allied status with Great Britain? Someone could chime in here. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
In 1940, Australia took action and sent their first wave of men from the 2nd Australian Imperial Force to the Middle East, an area to train, rest and adjust themselves to the foreign world.
Was that a kangaroo in the desert? Was that a mascot, I wonder?
Big luxury liners bring Australian and New Zealand armies to Egypt. One transport brings New Zealanders. They're under the command of Major General Freyberg, BC, a veteran, if one may apply the word to a man 50 years young, a veteran of the Great War.
Australian forces were originally sent to the Middle East and the Mediterranean basically as a staging post, as a staging area. They were to go to Egypt, to go to Palestine. They were supposed to learn how to train, learn how to become soldiers, because you need to keep in mind that the Australian Imperial Force was a volunteer army. They weren't professional soldiers. So they were to go to Palestine, go to training camps, learn how to fight, and then they were to be sent to England and then hopefully on to France to fight against the Germans and say a second Western Front.
They were also sent to Greece and to Crete.
Things, however, took a turn for the worst. Italy joined the war alongside Germany on the 10th of June 1940, creating a new battlefield in Africa. The current land of Libya was then Italian, presenting a new threat to the neighbouring British Egypt and French Algeria and Tunisia.
The most important thing in North Africa just happened to be the Suez Canal. Okay, and the Suez Canal being basically in the eastern part of Egypt. Supplies would have to go all the way around the southern end of Africa and up into Asia that way. That would mean convoys would have to travel down the Atlantic, which was very, very, very vulnerable to interdiction by German U-boats, German submarines. So had the Suez Canal fallen, that would have had a dire consequence for Commonwealth and British operations in the Far East.
On the 14th of June 1940, British and Commonwealth forces marched into Italian Libya with ease, pushing forward without resistance into the central and western parts of the territory. It was a complete success. The Allies believed the North African campaign was done, finished and forgotten. They were wrong. Expecting German reinforcements in Africa around May 1940, the Allies were in for a rude awakening when German forces landed and began their deadly assault on the 31st of March, 2 months earlier than expected. They pushed back the Allies with unprecedented speed, a movement which shocked military commanders across the globe. The man behind it? Erwin Rommel.
Desert Fox.
The German military commander fresh from Europe, a legend within the German army and Hitler's closest general. Unbeatable on the field, Rommel headed one of 10 German panzer divisions in the invasion of Poland and France. Undefeated, he was a serious threat and danger to the Allied war campaign. Holding the taken African land was of utmost importance. 1,000 kilometers west of Libya was the Suez Canal, the link between European and Asian theaters of war. If Germany took Egypt, Germany would win the war. An efficient and direct linkage between Japan and Germany would mean an undeniable defeat for the Allies.
Having control of the Suez Canal was also important because of access to the Middle East and all of the oil, which was vital for the Allies.
They could not lose Africa. As the Allies were pushed further and further back, it became undeniable that Tobruk had to be held. A deep-sea harbour, Italian fortifications, escarpments, cliffs, flat surroundings, barbed wire fencing, anti-tank ditches, and an airfield. Tobruk was holding point heaven. 14,000 Australian infantry, 11,000 British artillery and 1,000 Indian troops were garrisoned in Tobruk, and on the 13th of April 1941, the Afrika Korps reached them.
Poland also had a contingent of soldiers there as well. Let's not forget them.
And then Blitzkrieg began.
Blitzkrieg actually translates to lightning war. tactic used by Nazi Germany during this war?
A quick and ruthless surprise attack using tanks, infantry, artillery and air power that resulted in the downfall of France just a year before. This time, it was different. The Australians and the Indians were positioned on the outskirts of the town, with the Royal Artillery further from the front line. German tanks began the attack, but the Allied troops lay low, allowing the tanks to roll deeper into the town. Next followed the infantry, who were under the impression there was no resistance on the outskirts of Tobruk. However, the Allies leapt from their positions, eliminating all of the enemy infantry. What was left was a stranded, unsupported group of German tanks in the city. And that's when the artillery kicked in. Trying to flee, the German tanks began a retreat, but were greeted by the sounds of British cruiser tanks, destroying what was left of the German defensive. For the first time in the Second World War, Hitler's Wehrmacht had been stopped. 18 months of retreat, 18 months of defeat, had stopped here. The Allies' problems weren't over. A horseshoe of German forces had formed around Tobruk, creating a siege scenario. In fact, for 5 long, grueling months, the Aussies, Brits and Indians were stranded in Tobruk.
They're named from Lord Haw, who basically said, there you are, trapped like rats, living like rats in your bunkers and everything. And so they, in typical dry Australian humour, they said, rats we are the rats of Tobruk.
I think that German was a Nazi propagandist, if I'm correct.
Jack Capel was one of those men in Tobruk, a lieutenant of the 2nd Australian Imperial Force and a rat of Tobruk. For the 5 months inside Tobruk, times were tough. There was no escape from the dangers or the stresses. Men were often killed by enemy fire while relaxing in the sea. When not fighting, men were digging, wiring, laying mines, fletching and carrying rolls of wire, sandbags and water. Battalions were rotated every 2 to 3 weeks. Soldiers moved from the concrete bunkers or sandbagged posts on the red line to the rat holes on the secondary line, and then to the relative comfort of a reserve position. Food wasn't too bad either. Bully beef, prunes, rice and bread.
Conditions there were pretty bad though. Imagine being in the desert, scorching heat during the day and the temperature dropping to almost freezing at nighttime. It was a pretty horrendous experience actually.
Every night the food truck would come up, and 2 buckets of water. That was for the bully beef stew, and that was for the prunes and rice, and 2 buckets of water, one supposed to be hot, one cold. No tea towel.
A siege only works when you can cut off supply. Unfortunately for the Germans, they could not cut off, and the Italians, they could not cut off the resupply. Intermittent as it was, they could not cut off the resupply that was facilitated by the Royal Navy and the Royal Australian Navy. So yes, there was lots of rationing and it was hard, very, very hard. But at the end of the day, that didn't imperil their situation. They had enough to do what they needed to do.
Aldershot ovens also churned out freshly made bread 6 days a week. For the first 3 months of the Tobruk siege, there was a huge lack of vegetables and fruit.
Where were the Australians getting all their supplies from exactly?
But as the sea convoys became more frequent, the soldiers' diets became more adequate with vitamin and salt tablets.
Okay, so the sea
There
convoys...
became a little more of everything.
Okay.
New uniforms and boots, and even a distribution of rum to the frontline troops every 2 weeks. Unfortunately, the lust for a beer was only filled once or twice in the whole 5 months. Desert sores were common due to the harsh and unforgiving desert, which posed serious threats to the men and machinery.
In the desert, you would get desert sores or ulcers caused by certain kinds of bacteria, whereas in the jungle, you would actually get tropical ulcers, also caused by different kinds of bacteria.
And there's a light dust storm blowing all the time, and that was detrimental to the trucks and cars. There's no cars, but trucks and guns.
The German tanks were actually very prone to overheating, and as a result, it had a significant impact on the tank's engine life.
I had a load of 50-round magazine, a bingo carrier, and I used that at El Alamein, and it was full of dust, and they kept on jamming.
The water was also presented itself as an issue. Rommel often targeted the water supplies of the town, hoping to thirst the defenders into submission. But anti-aircraft gunners fought fiercely, defending the water storage till the end of the siege.
And I was guarding a water point, and the bombers came in at such an angle that we admired the pilots, and they bombed Ak position and made a terrible mess of it.
Brackish and chlorinated, it was the only thing they had. As casualties continued to rise, on July 1941, the Australian government wanted the troops out. Heavy losses in the Greece defensive meant that the government couldn't afford to lose more troops. The British government resisted, claiming that the retreat of so many troops was so immensely dangerous and difficult. However, an agreement was set. Over a 3-month period, the Australian soldiers were taken out of Tobruk. Night after night, the ship slipped into the harbour, ready to carry the boys home.
I believe that was called Operation Crusader, which relieved the siege and actually allowed Great Britain's 8th Army to actually take over Tobruk. New Zealand was also a part of that operation.
The Australians streamed on board, their packs and haversacks bulging with souvenirs crafted from shell cases, grenades and wrecked planes. Holds closed, rope ladders came up, lines were cast, and the convoy sailed out of the harbour into the night. The siege was over, and the boys were coming home. 5,989 Allied soldiers had died. Jack didn't rest. He went to Cairo for officer training, and then back into the Battle of El Alamein as a lieutenant, and suffered 2 perforated eardrums. Afterwards he fought in Papua New Guinea, pushing back offensive forces, and suffered from malaria, dengue fever and dysentery. Finally coming home, Jack then had to adapt himself to civilian life.
It would be interesting to ask a veteran like him what was worse, fighting in North Africa as a rat of Tobruk and at the Battle of El Alamein, or fighting in the horrid jungles of Papua New Guinea. For me, I think the jungle warfare probably would have been worse. What do you guys think?
The Tobruk story remains strong, however, and those who fought there will never be forgotten. Their names etched into memorials in Great Britain, Libya and Australia. The veterans and their loved ones keep the energy of the Rats strong, with Rats of Tobruk associations all over Australia. Glenda Gard, a remarkable woman, and the daughter of a rat, is a perfect example of the dedication many have for keeping the rat spirit alive. David Kendall, a veteran of the Vietnam War and a guide at the Australian War Memorial, is an amazing man. Portrays the Rats to the public as Aussie legends, just like he, equally, very much is so as well. Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Formiati of the Australian Army further reinforces how important our history is in shaping our nation today, and how we owe so much to those who fought for us in all wars, from the Boer to the Afghanistan. His passion and love for the Rats of Tobruk presents him none other as a key role model for today. Dr. Carl James from the Australian War Memorial, a man who has dedicated his life to publicising and informing the public on our rich and complex history, a crucial and greatly appreciated role in society. As Edmund Burke said himself, those who don't know history are destined to repeat it. And of course, Jack Cable. At 97, his love for life and humour makes him a joy to be around. Although him and many Tobruk veterans don't like to be called it, they are true Australian heroes. The Rats of Tobruk, the Stoppers of Germany, the Legends of Australia.
My utmost respect to all those individuals named on screen, as well as the Rats of Tobruk. And I just want to clarify that this was Germany's first land defeat, but it was not the Axis powers' first land defeat. Greece was able to defeat the Italians when they invaded on October 28, 1940. Anyway, if you do want to watch some more videos on World War II, then here you go. Thanks for watching.